Welcome to my segment on Moon and Virgo. As you can see, it got a little chilly today, and because of all the Red Sox hullabaloo, I guess it's appropriate that I picked my Red Sox sweatshirt to wear today. This sweatshirt was actually purchased in a moment of desperation when I went to go visit my father, who was doing alcohol compliance as one of his side jobs at Fenway Park. And I sort of didn't plan to go there later in the day when I was in Boston, and I didn't bring a coat or jacket. I was freezing my ass off, essentially. But all they had was men's sizes, and so it's kind of a weird fit, right? Anyways, Moon in Virgo. Security through analyzing. That sounds a little strange, like a bit of an oxymoron. So if you've been following my moon series, you'll know that we've talked about the moon being the planetary body of unconscious emotions, and it's often shaped through our earlier childhood up to about age 7, but that's, I think that it gets shaped based on our maturity and environment. I've been studying astrology and putting it into action too long to know that A, too many coincidences for it to be fake, and B, that environment and free will and choices will always have a say in the former, and the latter, free will and choices, will always trump whatever is going on in the rest of the chart. So I don't look at astrology as a predestination tool. Like, I don't have a Protestant view in that way. Some people do. But I think by doing that, you relinquish control of your own actions and your own feelings and your knee-jerk reactions to life. And this is a moon trait. What triggers you often is something that you experienced as a child, or what one of your influential childhood figures experienced or taught you as a child. So with the moon in Virgo, the emphasis is generally placed on the mother, but as we know, there are so many other things that could point to it being a female figure instead of your biological mother, or that there's a father figure that took on the motherly duties. Moon in Virgo will often manifest in a person as either the mother was sort of a fastidious and prim and proper type, or at the very least projected a sort of purity, someone who purported rules of manners, and this is how you should dress, and this is how you should act in front of certain company, and this is how your silverware is placed at your table, and this and that. And that's all well and good. And to have that, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm looking for a different word. Sort of like a wholesome mother figure, whatever that means to you in your culture, right? It could, of course, polarize to the other side. Either it did sometimes, or it was mostly like this, because Virgo is a sign of purity and criticism, which I think on the positive side would be called discernment, and on the negative side would be more carping and critical. It could be that your mother or mother figure was a little bit overly critical of you, or had tendencies to project their fears and their worries more onto you, and a lot of it is because they felt like it was their duty to impart these values on you, even though they may have experienced the same things when they were children, and realize that it didn't do a great job on them as children. They may have no choice but to just go through that unconscious habit. Excuse me, I'm gonna take this update off. No, I do not want to update right now. So somebody whose mother or mother figure carried one or both of these traits may have turned out to be the same way, overly critical of themselves when they weren't following some sort of rule of etiquette or a rule of staying prim and proper, sit like a lady, or being a respectful young man. It could be that the more visceral emotions that a Moon in Virgo child was showing were thwarted or sort of indicated they weren't correct, like anger was dirty and bad, or as sexual curiosity started blossoming, that maybe the subject of sex was taboo or omitted altogether or brought up in a really awkward way, or maybe too late, like, when you're 16, you already pretty much kind of know what's going on. So anything that was sort of considered dark or on the dark side of emotions may not have been allowed to have been felt. So as a Moon in Virgo subject, now this could be about you or someone else, right? So sort of keep this in mind. It could be that things manifest in you as not being correct, not being proper, when other people are displaying emotions that you were taught were wrong or bad or not correct to display in certain company, that you react poorly, you don't know how to deal with it. Maybe you get angry or overly critical of other people that show emotions in ways that you don't personally approve of, or you don't know why you don't approve of them until you start thinking back as to the parental figures that you most developed your emotional reactions around, right? So like I said, it doesn't have to be the mother, but in this case, it's not just your moon sign, but Virgo is a feminine sign too. But Virgo is also a mutable sign, so it can polarize in any sign that it is. Its ruler is Mercury, although some people think it's Vulcan, but I have seen this myself in my own studies, and because I'm a Pisces, I tend to collect Virgo types in my life, opposites attract and all that. So, and I also collect Leo types because I've got some Aries, and my Pisces sun is at 29 degrees, so technically that goes opposition into early Leos. Anyways, so as I've seen this Virgo energy manifest in multiple ways, I have seen how they can polarize. So let's take an example of like Madonna. She's got Moon in Virgo. Somebody that may at some point decide they want to be rebellious against their upbringing, whatever that was, and so maybe they go out and they do all the things that they were told weren't correct or weren't proper. And so they have this persona, or they get into this persona of being more free with their emotions, getting into things that were taboo, whether that was sex or being angry and overly emotional, or being heavily into sadness, because there's all different types of ways that people interpret those emotions. I don't think they're bad. I think there's no bad emotion, but often in our culture, this is what gets taught to children. And so, but there's still always a sense of control. The Moon in Virgo does not like to lose control of their emotions and their emotional state. And not saying that they don't feel things or react to things, but if they are ever to have this persona of being sort of a player, or somebody that doesn't really do the monogamy thing, I don't want to say loose morals, because whose morals? Like, who's putting these standards on you? Like, if you want to go and develop casual relationships with multiple people, it's neither bad nor good. So a lot of the Virgo standards of purity are based off of the culture you were born in, right? So if you were born in my culture, it would be being slutty. I hate that word, but just to get a point across, male or female, doesn't matter. So the Moon in Virgo at some point will probably go that direction if there's anything to rebel against, right? But there's always in control. There's always the sense that they don't quite lose it, and there's not really a sense of escape in the moon in Virgo. Remember, Virgo is a more rational, logical, Spock-like sign. So the emotions are usually well guarded, and unfortunately, they're regarded as something that needs to be tidied up and put away in a little compartment and needs to be controlled or at least subdued at all times. And this is where Moon in Virgo, in order to develop, needs to, unless explosive bouts of anger or severe rampages of depression are prominent somewhere in the chart, like Saturn's in the first house, with a couple other things, it's not just one aspect, then they have to allow themselves to feel these different ways and know that it's okay, and know that they don't have to tidy up their emotions. Emotions are not to be cleaned up. There's no black and white, but sometimes, at least early on, the moon in Virgo will try to see emotions in black and white because it's easier to control that way. It's easier to compartmentalize. It's easier to categorize in the head. So being able to just feel without wondering why or how would be a great way for Moon in Virgo to evolve their moon sign. To know that not knowing, it can be the greatest state. It's more liberating to not know and to know it's okay to not know than try to pick apart every reason why so-and-so is acting like that. And why did that person say that about me? And I don't like how they're responding to this. And just basically keep your nose in your business and learn to be kinder to your own visceral reactions, but also understand when they're not serving you. So when you have a partner or a sibling or even a parent to whom you will start giving your opinions on how they should be acting and reacting to things, just understand that we all are coming from our own emotional point of view. And it's a lot easier to manage other people's emotions when you're hiding from something than your own. And so if you find yourself constantly reaching out to pick apart other people's stuff, then it might be your sign to rein it in and look more inside. There's a cool saying in one of the books that says, what you don't know is always greater than what you do. I like that quite a bit. I will also give you part of my experience with Moon in Virgo, because Virgo is a sign of service and duty. Very often people with this sign feel really secure in helping others, and there's this great feeling of wanting to be needed. And when the moon in Virgo is coupled with like Leo in any way, for instance, that becomes a huge deal, especially if like you have Venus in Leo, because Venus in Leo really wants to be needed by their partner and sort of worshipped or adulated to some degree. But in general, moon in Virgo wants to be of service, wants to help other people. And sometimes it's in the health field, or mental health can be part of that too. Conversely, the first thing that tends to go when a moon in Virgo person is suppressing emotions and not dealing with their own turmoil is their health, particularly anything that's nerve related, like a nervous stomach, the nervous system in general. We know that you have your own nervous system. It's primarily in your small intestine, the enteric nervous system, and I always find that this is the nervous system that's actually what Virgo is about. Not the central nervous system. Actually, Uranus is often associated with that, but the enteric nervous system, which actually sends signals to your brain. So how you eat, particularly when you're emotional or you're feeling like you're out of control emotionally, is really important. So binging on stuff that's not good for you, although might be your first reaction, it's probably a better idea not to. And in fact, I have seen some moon in Virgos purify their diet when the shit's hitting the fan from them in relationships or their own things, or dealing with past childhood traumas. They actually become more strict in regimen in what they eat. It's almost like they're sort of punishing themselves. And that's another thing Moon in Virgo is great at, is punishing themselves when anything that they're engaged in or that they're feeling that isn't that doesn't exemplify purity of intention or motive can eat them away, and there's the great tendency to deprive themselves of things. And another thing is Moon in Virgo generally makes decisions based on duty over emotional fulfillment. So you will often see them tend towards, I'm going to stick with this relationship because it's, or with, I'm going to be with this person because they're more stable and they're safer and they represent maybe their own mother or whatever it is that they grew up with, that represents a true woman or a true man to them based on their childhood perceptions of the man or the woman that they grew up adulating, right? So just keep that in mind if you're Moon in Virgo or you're dealing with a Moon in Virgo. I'm not saying if you're dealing with a Moon in Virgo, change and try to emulate the parent of the figure, prominent figure of the gender that you're representing, but to understand that there tends to be a lot of overanalyzing the emotions. That's just how it is, and it can be controlled. Of course, it can be. You have choices. You can certainly just get in deep and start feeling and stop putting it all up here, right? So that's why the Moon in Virgo is a really interesting placement, because the Virgo, the sign of Virgo being ruled by Mercury, but it is an earth sign, so there's that feminine, receptive, yin, emotional side to it that does mesh okay with the moon. But in general, the Virgo traits tend to lend itself better towards things that are logical, which emotions are not, right? So we mentioned Madonna as having Moon in Virgo. It's really interesting because I've read this, that she's a very strict parent, and she grew up in a pretty strict household, and her mother died when she was 5. And I guess her mother was extremely religious and often had priests and nuns over at the house, and so there's this virginal quality. And of course, like a virgin, I mean, Madonna did a really great job of creating that image around, the open sexuality and sensuality, and yet she herself was pretty well in control of her private life in terms of that. So she did a great job of her career. She's also a really good businesswoman. And I think it's very interesting that somebody with Moon in Virgo would really have that virginal archetype as their mother for the first 5 years of her life. So anyways, Stephen Hawking also has Moon in Virgo. J.K. Rowling, and I know that she does a great deal of work to help others, a lot of charity, which is hugely typical of Moon in Virgo, by the way. Another thing that's typical of Moon in Virgo is to love and have an affinity with animals, for sure. I mean, Sun Virgo too, of course. Moon in Virgo kind of can look to animals as that purity, so they feel safer with animals sometimes. Like the Moon in Virgo person might be the one that goes to a group of people, and the first people they gravitate towards are the children and the animals, because they're the easiest ones, the ones that they don't have any judgment towards or criticism towards, because when they approach a child or an animal, they're approaching the purest embodiment of what they think humans are. But the really interesting things about children and animals is that they're also really in tune with their visceral aspects, and so Moon in Virgo can take a page from their book and understand that there is no black and white, it's all gray, and to stop picking apart emotions that you and others are feeling, and to just allow them to run their course. Take a little page from Pisces, which is about acceptance and going with the flow and having less boundaries. I don't want to say no boundaries, because have you ever fallen into water like in a not good angle, like belly flop, or like I was once on a tube and being, of course, carried by a boat and I slipped off and bounced off the water. I was probably only this far off the, well, maybe this far off the water. And when I bounced off, I thought I broke my arm. I was pretty sure I broke my arm. So you can't say water doesn't have boundaries. They definitely have. That surface tension is a boundary of some kind, but underneath there's always so much going on. And so letting all that stuff underneath go on, you can still have that measured, calm persona. Nothing wrong with that, as long as you're not fooling yourself and you're giving yourself that time and space to cry, or try not to punch too many walls. I've known Moon and Virgos that have broken bones because they only let their anger out once in a while. Like, you gotta be measured, man. You gotta have it. When you feel it, let it out. Don't let it bubble up, okay? So that's the Moon in Virgo spiel. Next, we're going to have Moon in Libra, which is security through relating. If you have any questions, feel free to throw it down in the comments. Subscribing would be awesome. I would love to have more subscribers. You could like the video, and feel free, if you want to contact me for any birth chart information with maybe some transits, also known as a horoscope. I'm happy to provide that, and my favorite thing to do is relationship synastry, comparing two charts. I love comparing people to see how they may or may not interact. So anyways, I hope you have a really awesome, wonderful rest of your whatever you have going on. See you later.